Kadesh isn't just a famous battle, it's the moment you realize that, even 3,300 years ago, war was already a mix of strategy, intelligence, logistics, psychology, and above all, storytelling. Because Kadesh is also the battle where propaganda becomes part of the weapon. We're in the 13th century BCE, at the height of the Bronze Age, when two superpowers dominate the Near East. On one side Egypt under Pharaoh Ramesses II, on the other the Hittite Empire led by King Muwatalli II. In between lies Syria, a region that isn't of a periphery at all, but the beating heart of trade, caravan routes, ports, tributes, wealthy city-states, and alliances that shift like the wind. Kadesh is strategic because it controls a key corridor along the Orontes River. Hold it, and you control passages, supply lines, and political influence. It's one of those cities that, more than being conquered, is fought over the way we fight over a maritime strait or an energy route today. Ramses II Sale al trono e vol una cosa precisa, reprendersi il controllo dell'area che elegito aveva perso negli anni precedenti. Per lui non è solo un obiettivo militare, a legittimità, prestigio, dimostrazione che gli dei sono con lui. E infatti l'esercito egiziano non marcia come un gruppo di soldati qualunque, o organizzato in grandi divisioni che portano nomi divini, amon, are, ta seth, un dettaglio importantissimo per tifa capire come religione e politica facero fuse. Un farione non combat solo per il territorio, combat come rappresentante del cosmo, dell'ordine contro il caos. The campaign starts like a grand plan. Ramesses advances north toward Kadesh, convinced he can force a decisive battle. But the Hittites don't want a clean showdown in open ground, they want to break the Egyptians using the most modern weapon of the time, the war chariot. And it's worth pausing here, chariots aren't just a cinematic detail, they're the era's elite strike force. Fast, loud, devastating against disorganized infantry, they're built to hit where it hurts and spark panic. And the most interesting part is this, in this phase of history, victory doesn't go only to the side with more men, it goes to the side that can coordinate mobility, surprise, and information. And here comes the most instructive anecdote of Kadesh, disinformation. Ramesses receives a news from men posing as deserters or nomads. They claim the Hittite army is far away, very far, almost out of reach. It's the perfect lie, because it pushes Ramesses to do the most dangerous thing possible, speed up and advance without keeping all his divisions tightly concentrated. In other words, they make him believe he has time. And when you think you have time, you make mistakes. Only later, when other men are captured and interrogated, does the truth emerge. The Hittites are extremely close, hidden behind the city, ready to strike. It's a lesson that still applies today. On the battlefield, it's not only the hardest hitter who wins, it's the one who controls information. And at Kadesh, the Hittites play that card brilliantly. The blow lands when part of the Egyptian army, still marching and trying to regroup, is slammed by a mass of Hittite chariots that bursts out suddenly. Picture it, dust exploding upward, wheels tearing the ground, horses at full gallop, spears and arrows, screams, and above all, the shock of being attacked at the worst possible moment. The struck division breaks apart, some flee, others are crushed, and the chaos spills toward the main camp, where Ramesses had already begun to set up. At that point, the battle changes its nature. It's no longer two armies lined up, but a violent collision where disorder spreads like a disease. And the almost ironic, yet deeply human, detail is that many Hittites, convinced they've already won, begin looting the camp, losing cohesion and wasting time. It happens often in history. Greed and the rush to a cash in a success destroy discipline precisely when clear thinking is most needed. This is where the legend of Ramesses is born. In Egyptian accounts, the pharaoh finds himself almost isolated with only a few men of his guard and makes a desperate move. He counterattacks. The narrative paints him as a near-superhuman hero who, from his chariot, leads repeated charges, pushes back waves of enemies, calls upon Ammonius, and turns the tide through sheer will. It's an incredibly powerful story, designed to be carved into temples, read, heard, and repeated. And that's exactly what makes Kadesh unique. It isn't only a battle, it's a communication campaign. Ramesses has his version engraved in reliefs and texts, in sacred places, in front of the eyes of thousands of people for generations. It's as if he turned a moment of real danger, because it truly was, into a permanent monument to his image. But what really happens behind the epic? The most realistic explanation is that Ramesses manages to buy time and space, and above all, he reorganizes part of his forces as reinforcements arrive and the other divisions regroup. The Egyptian army isn't annihilated, but it also doesn't capture Kadesh. The battle becomes a long day of clashes, counterattacks, and attempts to control the ground. The Hittites strike hard, but they can't deliver the finishing blow. The Egyptians resist and recover from the initial panic, but they can't turn survival into a strategic victory. And here's the key point: militarily, Kadesh is essentially a stalemate. And that stalemate is what makes the story so fascinating, because it sparks the question everyone asks: who really won? If you look at the immediate outcome, the Hittites hold the city, so territorially they can say they kept their position. If you look at battlefield survival, Ramesses can say, "You didn't destroy me, you didn't capture me, I'm still here." And if you look at the media outcome, where in the ancient world a media means what gets written, carved, and remembered, Ramesses wins massively. Because his version becomes the dominant one over time. What's fascinating is that the Hittites don't seem to feel the same need to turn Kadesh into a heroic myth. For them it's important, but not necessarily, the story of the century. That contrast shows how Egypt, under Ramesses, understood something strikingly modern: controlling the narrative means controlling memory. And now comes the real ending, one many people don't know: Kadesh doesn't end at Kadesh. For years, the region stays unstable, alliances shift, and both Egypt and the Hittites realize that bleeding out for that zone is costly and dangerous. There are internal pressures, other enemies, balances to maintain. And then, later, something extraordinary happens. A peace treaty is reached between Egypt and the Hittites, one of the most famous and oldest diplomatic treaties preserved. The incredible part isn't only that it exists, it's that we have versions from both sides, with clauses that feel surprisingly modern: non-aggression, mutual aid, the handling of refugees and exiles, guarantees sworn before the gods. It's as if Kadesh taught two empires a realpolitik lesson: war doesn't always produce a winner, but it can produce an agreement that benefits both. And there's a final detail that feels like a political novel scene: peace doesn't remain only written, it's reinforced through dynastic alliances. Ramesses II, at one point, marries a Hittite princess. Put simply, the enemy becomes family. And that's a huge message, because in antiquity marriages aren't love, they're living treaties. A signature that walks, breathes, and makes it harder to turn back. So if you wonder today why Kadesh is so legendary, the answer is this: because it's the moment you see everything at once. You see war as a clash between global powers of the time. You see disinformation used as a weapon. You see chariot technology reshaping the battlefield. You see the real risk of disaster and the ability to absorb that and survive. And above all, you see the birth of something that still decides how we remember events: propaganda, narrative control, the victory of memory. Kadesh isn't only a battle between Egypt and the Hittites, it's a battle between what happens and what gets told. And often, as Ramesses II teaches, the story lasts longer than the chariot wheels.